Let's say I'm very, very happy to be here. So thank you, Jaime. Thank you, team, for the work, and thanks, Catherine. I'm very, very happy to be here for a number of reasons. And apologize for my voice. I know it's super low. I'll do my best to be as loud as possible. Let's say, first of all, it proves I was right 10 years ago. When I'm a computer scientist by training, so I graduated in information technology. And my first project, right after my bachelor thesis, which was part of that, was setting up wireless networks connecting hospitals and schools in West Africa and Ghana particularly. When I was there, it was 2004, I was very full of good intention about how technology could have made Africa rise up. And I got very interested about the reaction of the communities I was working with. Let's say I learned that technology was interesting to them, but let's say what really moved them, what really made them passionate about was agriculture and natural resources management, because I was in a rural area. That was their daily life. Had to struggle with agriculture, finding agricultural inputs, sustainably managing resources that could have been depleted, that were depleted mainly a decade earlier, and so on. So I moved myself from, say, the digital divide arena into a ICT applied to agriculture and natural resources management, and I got a PhD in agriculture at the University of Milan, which is where I'm also based yet, so you were correctly referring to. So yeah, I was right in this workshop. I was right to make that move, and I'm very happy this workshop tries to bridge these two dimensions. Possibly you remember in a science forum in Wageningen in 2009, it was a very nice attempt to bridge the two sides, let's say. And I'm happy because I really think that agriculture, I think the choice was right, because agriculture, I do believe it's a game changer. Maybe I'm stating something which is super obvious for all of us, but I know one of the sponsors of the event is here, so I would like to stress it, to say you did the right thing. Agriculture is a game changer for many, let's say, challenges for developing and emerging regions and for the so-called developed world. First of all, water. If you think about how much is the fresh water we do have out of the global water we do have, it's just a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of that. 2.5% of all the water we do have is fresh water, and all of that water is mainly used by agriculture. So 70% circa is used by agriculture. So you can imagine how much the impact of agriculture is on water and how key agriculture is for sustainable management of water. And agriculture is also a big polluter of water. So rivers and lakes, it's one among groundwater and deltas is one among the biggest polluters. It's possibly the biggest polluter for lakes and rivers, and it's the second for wetlands. So there's a strong linkage between agriculture and water, and agriculture is being a problem, but it can also be a big part of the solution. Same applies with climate change. Climate change is going to severely impact agriculture in developing and emerging regions, and I will say worldwide. But as much as agriculture is going to be impacted by climate change, it's also a part of the problem. It's the major contributor of methane and nitrous oxide, and it's as much equivalent in terms of CO2 emission and transport and the industry sectors. So when you think about agriculture being a green practice, that's not the reality, at least. It's just a part of that. So agriculture is really the battlefield when we can actually make it whole, the global system become more sustainable or collapse, at least to my perception. So it's a great opportunity. And when you think about developing and emerging regions, most of the poorest, the extreme poverty is located in rural areas, so many people living under $1 per day. So, and much of the work they do is agriculture. So 40% global workforce is employed in agriculture, and 80% Burundi, I think it's the top country in such sense, works in agriculture. So if you want to lift people out of poverty, you have to focus on agriculture at least. And there's also some evidence that actually if you do invest in agriculture, the benefit for the extreme poverty is higher than investing in other sectors, up to 5 times more effective according to Wider. Plus, sometimes I do smile when I hear that agriculture Africa, it's a matter of smallholder, which is true. 80% of smallholders, 80% of the food in Africa is produced by smallholder farmers. But it doesn't mean it's not a big opportunity also for a market. It's more than 300 billion US dollars, the estimated value, and it could exceed 1 trillion in 2030, according to the World Bank. So agriculture is definitely something to keep an eye on if we want to focus on developing and emerging regions. And last but not least, women's condition, gender issues. These striking numbers by the NDP saying that women own 1% of the land but carry out basically something around 70-80% of the rural work. When you think about that, and you think that 43% of the agricultural labor force in developing countries is made by women, did you understand how critical agriculture is as a leverage to promote gender issues, gender balance, etc.? And that's another statistic from FAO. If women would have access to same resources men do, they would probably produce 20-30, their yields could be increased by 20-30%. So this is something I'm always happy to state, and I think this workshop can help in creating a narrative about agriculture. And digital technologies can help because my experience is that really digital technologies can help youth being engaged in agriculture. Some of the presenters that preceded me told about the need to actually engage youth in agriculture, especially in developing and emerging regions. If you think about now, 200 million people in Africa is between 15 to 24 years old. In 2045, it will double. So we have to engage youth in agriculture. And digital technologies is already being employed by Kenya and Rwanda, notably, to let's say, make agriculture feel attractive for the youth. Digital technologies is already experiencing, you're probably aware more than me, how much digital technology is already transforming the developing world. Access to internet is increasing, expansion of mobile phones ownership, mobile phone penetration, which is a different thing, meaning family could have a mobile phone and 3 different SIM cards, so each one in the family can use the mobile phone at different times. That makes a lot of difference. Expansion of mobile internet and rise of the social web. Internet is it's been more and more affordable worldwide. It's unfortunate that you cannot really see the numbers, but basically you could see that Africa is kind of lagging behind in terms of internet affordability. But the numbers, the figures are very good. When you think that, for example, there's this indicator called ICT price basket, which is an ITU indicator. Basically, it says how much you have to spend to access to ICT services: broadband, fixed landline, and mobile subscription. And 2010 to 2012, developed countries, there was a general decrease in the price you have to spend to access to such services. 18% in developing countries, 23% in developed countries, and if you think the rate, of course, of decrease is much higher in developing countries on the right. That's particularly for broadband. So the broadband is becoming more and more cheap in developing countries at a higher rate than in developed countries. And if you look at Sub-Saharan Africa particularly, in these 2 years, you had a decrease of 55% in the cost of broadband and 25% of the cost of mobile subscription. Still, again, Sub-Saharan Africa is lagging behind, but things are improving if compared to 10 years ago when Kofi Annan, I don't know if you remember the World Summit for Information Society was saying, we have information technology now, let's build an information society because we have someone who has access to technology and information, someone who has not. This is improving worldwide. The mobile is definitely, it's been definitely a big answer to that, even though I think it's no panacea, but still. If you look at, this is the first quarter of 2014, this is a report that just came out from Ericsson. We currently have 6.8 billion mobile subscription globally. And if you think, if you look at the right, let's say China, Africa, India, you see how much the number of subscriptions is higher than Europe and let's say it's called the Western world. Particularly if you look at the new ones, the newcomers in mobile subscription, in the first quarter of 2014, you have 26 million new people subscribing in Africa, 19 in China, 28 in India, 5 million in the Middle East, and 23 in Asia and Pacific region, excluding China and India. So to say, let's say the base of how much when you hear the phrase the next billion of smartphones is going to be in Africa, that's probably true, and it will probably happen much rapidly than we think it could happen. Even for social media, I don't know if you know which is the language which is growing much faster on the internet. I don't know if anyone has the guess. It's Arabic. So Arabic is again looking from a developing and emerging region. Arabic is the language which is growing much faster on the web, and there are some countries that already put the US behind in terms of use of social networks and social media, like Egypt, Russia, and the Philippines. And if you look at the figures on your right of African Facebook users in 2013, they're not that much, relatively speaking, it's just 50 million, but still, numbers are increasing. So now, trying to blend the two things. What can digital technology do for sustainable food chains in developing and emerging regions? I use that phrase, developing and emerging regions, because I feel like the more time, how can I say, I feel like it's no more north and south, and it's more of different centers, different peripheries, and outskirts, both in the north and the south. There is a brilliant project from Sardinia, which is a region in Italy, which is lagging behind on some indicators, but it's doing a great traceability via GIS system to help local producers trace their products. And this is a good example of how this technology can be very good in developing and emerging regions as much as in rural areas in the developed world. There was Moya doing a very interesting question, and I had to put this slide in, to change this slide in, because I think that was really interesting. Does this alternative versus conventional food networks make sense in developing and emerging regions? I think it does even less sense, in a manner of speaking. When you think about food expenditure being around 6% in the US and being 47 in Pakistan, 44 in Kenya, up to 36 in Peru, that tells you something, I feel. That tells you that it's more likely that people is less ready to pay more for value-added products in that areas, or for alternative food networks, or that has happened here. And it was the same like 50 years ago. If I would have gone to my I come from a family of farmers, and if I would have gone to my grandfather saying we should produce something for alternative food network, he would have probably taken a stick and beaten me up. And it's the same when you have a smallholder farmer in Ghana. Your key point is trying to make a living out of what you grow and consume a big chunk of what you produce, and stay up. That's the key thing. So it's very difficult. Farmers are very resistant in making such changes. It needs to be gradual. But please correct me if I'm wrong, because I heard you also had this experience in developing countries. So it's skating on ice, and how do we create sustainable food supply chains then? Well, first of all, okay, this is gonna be messed up because of the interoperability. But first of all, I think focusing on sustainable, to me, it means making using digital technology to make farmers produce at decreased cost. So basically using technology to help farmers take more in its pocket at the end of in his or her pocket at the end of the season. As Hamlet would say, "Hey, there is a rub," because if you, well, this is gonna be bad. If the product is cheaper at the end of the season, I'm pretty positive that in a couple of seasons, what's going to happen, or even less, the intermediaries will be able to pay less to the farmers, but in the pocket of the farmers themselves will not remain that much. So we need to add value to the chain, to the chains, to be able, farmers can reap the benefit. And so it's not like a cost-based competition. And to do so, we need to add value, and we need to build inclusive supply chains to make sure that our smallholder farmers getting back roughly 80% of them can actually produce a higher value product, so that at the end of the season they can actually some surplus they can put into their pocket, into their family, and back into their local economy. What's the, let's say, status of food value chains in developing and emerging regions? There is kind of a paradox. You do have a strong demand of products, but on the other hand, it's very difficult. Most of you name standards as a high barrier to actually penetrate the markets of the developed world. And this is true at the global level. At regional level, there are lower barriers in terms of standards, but there are also less consolidated chains. Even though this is kind of changing, if you look at, for example, urban areas in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, supermarkets are increasingly being part of the territory. And the problem there is regional markets. There are higher tariffs barrier country to country, which explains some price dynamics and explains why it's difficult to actually. It's even though the price of some products is cheap in developed to be sold to developed worlds, and will be higher in a regional market. For some farmers, for some farmers in developing region, it's easier to actually access to developed markets rather than the neighbors. So that's a problem. And if you look at the amount of data and information produced on value chain, there is quite a lot of goods, artifacts, products, and information coming from the supplier to the producer, the assembler, traders, processors, retailers, and back. So you do have goods on one side, and on the other hand, you do have data and information coming back in form of preferences back to the origin. So you kind of have a cycle of information. And there are many actors. There are institutions and rules. There are also international donors here. There are core actors, so farmers, processors, retailers, and you have business service providers like veterinaries, extension agents, where they remain, etc. I wanted to provide you with one example because I feel like this is particularly interesting because it has all these people, let's say, at least one every let's say actor involved. In Jamaica, there was a huge problem in 2006, if I'm not wrong. There was a pest that basically gall midge that prevented the export of black pepper, which is a huge thing in terms of market in the Caribbean region, to the US and Europe. So basically the black pepper had to be quarantined before being imported in the US and in Europe, and this created a very negative impact on the local market. So the production, the import, the export switched to from 800 to 300 between 97 and 2001. And what happened? There was a partnership with the institutions, the producers, and the let's say the industry involved in using technology, leveraging digital technology to help, for instance, the business. GPS was used to map location of pepper producers. The details on all parties involved was shared so that farmers, inspectors, and exporters, and also the importers on the other side could be collected and recorded. This meant that when there was a data gap or a pest was retrieved, it was easier to trace back to actually request immediate action and to trace back to the origin, which is good for as an early warning system, but it's also good because this enabled to the creation of historical data sets, historical series, and so it prevented and it basically provided information on pest-free periods, pest-free areas, the spread of disease, etc. So it's much more than just early warning. There are a zillion of ICT applications being used currently in the developing world, and I won't bother you by telling how what each of them does. And there are many more. 10 years ago, we used to say the last thing the world needs is another website. Today is the last thing the world needs is another app, probably. But even though there will be more app adding up, and there will be more websites still. And there are, this is just a small portion of what's happening just for the mobile sector. So you have the production, pre-production, production, harvesting, processing, transport and logistics, and sales and marketing. So you do have applications in each of them because you do have data and information needs in each of them. And there are, interestingly, good examples of applications like iCal, just to tell you one, which has been developed in Kenya, being used also in other countries, not only in East Africa, but also in other regions. So, just like Ushahidi, just like I've been using Ushahidi to map what was wrong in my little village in the north side of Italy, which is a Kenyan-based software. There are other products being developed in emerging regions, which is being increasingly customized for developed regions as well. This is kind of a scary sneak peek at the future. I say it's scary because I leave you the answer. This is a project I've been involved into. I don't know if you are familiar with the Data for Development Challenge. It's a challenge from Orange Telecom. Basically in 2013 they released anonymized call data records, meaning 2.5 billion call records and SMS from the Ivory Coast, from 5 months of the Ivory Coast and around 5 million users. And partnering with the group, the fellowship I work with and the Dutch University, we were trying to look at anomalies, how mobile traffic is increased with this or that event on the agricultural side. And these things you can see is two rainfall anomalies. So there was heavy rainfall at that time in these two areas, and that was linked with increased in-phone calls. When you think about one of the main problems in Africa being, and not only Africa, being the absence of data, local data, or climate data, etc., you can realize how much these technologies can be instrumental in providing cost-effective response to weather events, for example, but also for pest outbreaks. And also, it can be useful for optimization of irrigation, logistics, harvesting, for yield performance. For example, if you look at cost at marketing time in cocoa producing region, you can have a feeling of how much let's say, or how the season is going. Again, this is also scary, but I kind of, I mean, the Orwellian dystopian future he portrayed is scary, but I'm also scared by the Aldous Huxley dystopian future, where it's not what we hate, like control, but rather what we like, and that it's even more scary. And if you think I think that the as opposed to Orwell, 1984, in Huxley, The Brave New World, he used to say there are 3 keywords: community, stability, and identity. And it's scary when you think about how it was. Let's say it was. Let's say it's an interesting. I'll leave it for your midnight readings. I just wanted to focus on one. If I should pick up one way digital technology could be really helpful in creating smaller inclusive value chains, sustainable value chains. I see kind of a marriage in between agribusiness companies and producers. And when I mean agribusiness companies, I don't mean Monsanto, I just mean local agribusiness companies, regional agribusiness companies. And the problem is, it can be public driven, it can be private driven, there are many problems, meaning when you are an agribusiness company, you have certain standards you want to meet. And when you're a producers, generally speaking, you don't want to pay for advice. So what digital technologies can do, they can include the trusted channels and intermediaries along the way to make profitable for agribusiness to have local producers part of their supply chain. Same applies with improving the communication system for monitoring production, so ensuring the quality of production, facilitating transactions, enable traceability, and of course integration of management tools. There are a number of examples I could bore you to death with, but if you are interested, just let me know. I'll be here. Couple of slides on issues and drawbacks. But ICT-related issues, so still gaps in assessing ICTs, no matter how much people still has a mobile phone in Africa. Most of them, like 70%, if I'm not wrong, they don't have smartphone. They do have a traditional mobile phone, which is good anyway because it makes you visible along the supply chain, but still. Content and literacy. So there is a zillion content on the internet, whether it's customized, that's another story. And whether that comes at the timely to the smallholder who actually needs that information, that's another story again. Then there's waste management, there's Russian natural resources to these information communication technology devices, and there is this sort of approach, solution-seeking problems and not vice versa, which is very computer science thing. So, digital technologies are no panacea. Kentaro Toyama is a great scholar, one of the founder of the ICT for Development movement, saying technology is only a magnifier of human intent. It cannot be a substitute. So digital technologies can be a great thing, but it won't build sustainable food systems alone. And I recommend when you're finished with Aldous Huxley, I recommend this paper, Revisiting the Futures of Kerala in India. It's a brilliant example of how a success story. So fishers in Kerala using mobile phones to negotiate better deals on the market was revisited quite recently and say, yeah, that was just part of the story. So mobile phones were important, but the users were using mobile phones also for other livelihoods-related actions. The market was structured in a way they could have been flexible in negotiating agreements with others. So it's not just mobile phones. And with regards to food supply chain in themselves, there are other issues. So most smallholder farmers are not part of value chains at all. How can we ensure there is a balance between smallholder and agribusiness? He advocated for regulators, and I feel like this is a space we need to understand which are the services that public can provide, so to ensure that there is no imbalance of power between smallholder farmers and agribusinesses. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much.